What up? What up? We're back with episode 3 of Welcome to the Spaceship. So, funny little pre segment before we hop into this. We actually recorded one episode on Paradox, wasn't that good. And then we recorded another episode that same day on, I believe, what was it? I don't even remember. But that one low key wasn't good. Or no, it came to me, then it left. Anyways, that one honestly wasn't that good neither. So we kind of scrapped both those ideas, and here we are. Today we're going to be speaking about masks. And so this is something, Ali and I were just talking about a whole separate conversation. Honestly, that'll probably be a podcast in and of itself. But we're speaking about this particular topic and came to the realization, or specifically, I came to the realization that masks are kind of our pillar when discussing things like shadow work or even just the whole spiritual, I guess you could say, awakening
Wait. Oh. So my internet is pretty bad.
So I will start this off by saying, Ollie, what do you think a mask is, slash, what does mask in general mean to you?
Alright, so. Um. Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's something you put on and off and conceals your entirety, your whole identity, which it's a metaphor, of course, but any metaphor can be applied to life itself, I guess. So when we interact with others, we don't always show our 100% personhood because it's impossible, right? We as humans cannot perceive everything. So we have learned through socialization, through being socialized into this community that we grow up into. We've learned the do's and don'ts of how to interact with others. And usually, most adults don't re examine that. We take what we learn as kids and apply it to our life forever until something, which is where paradoxes come into play, something challenges those beliefs or those attitudes that we have towards life. And that's when the mask begins to shatter, I suppose, because ultimately the mask is just a set of behaviors and thoughts, patterns of thinking that you keep holding onto but aren't 100% yours. For example, when you learn to people please, that doesn't come from you necessarily, it comes from how you interact with people around you. Um, and so the mask is, like I said, a metaphor of just this persona, this part of you. Because one thing that I want to clarify is the mask is not false; it's just incomplete. It's a part of you that you choose to present to public, whether it be a conscious choice of I am going to present this way, or a subconscious choice of I've always presented this way. So yeah. And also something else that I want to add, masks is not like one. I don't think we only have one mask. I think many of us are able to navigate life in many different masks, especially if you consider yourself a type of chameleon based on how you observe yourself throughout life. If you were that kind of person who always was able to blend into different groups of people, that takes a toll on people as adults because it's mostly performance to fit in.
Right? Putting so much energy into all these kind of other things. And so, you know what? You saying that masks are not false, that reminds me and my buddy Ryan, we were listening to this podcast, and it's actually this undercover FBI agent who would infiltrate all these different organizations, crime based, even some like racist kind of like Aryan Brotherhood type organizations or uh, I guess you could. I was going to use the word syndicates. Anyways, point is though, he had said something that kind of stuck out to me and just reminded me when you said this. He was like, I was making pacts and brotherhoods with these people, and they tell me that they loved me, and they would tell me, I'm gonna be there for your kids when you have kids, and blah 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 blah. And he said the one thing that always bugged me was it wasn't that I was being a fake person. I was really being me, but it wasn't real. And so that particular line just stuck out to me. But to come back to this topic of masks, for me, when I'm looking at masks, and specifically speaking from the angle of like wanting to heal yourself, or if you're starting your spiritual awakening journey, you have to confront it at some point. And like Albert, I was about to say a real alias. Um, you know, a lot of people, it's not really a literal mask that you're putting on, right? Like, let's get this idea out the way of like you're changing who you are in front of everybody you're coming across. That's not the idea. The idea is that from person to person, or group to group, situation to situation, you have to almost, like he said, become a chameleon, and in a way configure around certain people or certain groups that wouldn't necessarily be you, but at the same time, like this FBI agent was saying, is you, right? Like he was pretty much saying that all the things that made up that character, and that's actually exactly what he called it, was playing a character. All the things that are making that character are you. So it's not like this mask is fake, right? It's not like, unless sometimes it is. And that's not to say it can't be. Sometimes we do put masks on that aren't completely us at all, like not even by a little bit. But it's not like these masks are fake. It's not like we're wearing something that isn't truly us. It is us, but it's us for a purpose or a cause that isn't necessarily us, if that makes sense. And so, to give a great example of this or some context from my own life, I grew up a basketball player. I love basketball as a sport. I'm fairly decent at it. But truly, I mean, everybody who was my friends growing up, I had to create this mask to interact with them, because it was like they wouldn't like what I would do, if I wasn't wearing that mask. And so I actually was just having this conversation with my mom. Um, but I was like, you remember me as a kid? Like, I was nerdy. I loved video games. I loved building and playing toys, and like just all kind of, I guess you could say, opposite of being an athlete. Teammates, and some of them to this day my best friends. I had to create a mask that wasn't me at all. And so, or let me further elaborate, not to say that it wasn't me at all, because again, those things were me, but they weren't necessarily things that truly identified with who I would say was under that mask. And again, to come back to the point of having a pillar or a foundation, when we spoke about values, we kind of touched on masks here and there. But this again is where you have that foundation or that pillar. And like what Ali was saying, is that a lot of times what our masks consist of are what people's projections are onto us. And then we live those things. We don't necessarily ever have a time. Well, I wouldn't say that we don't have a time. It's not about a time. We don't ever just look at the mask and say, like, why don't I take this off? We always continue to wear it. We do everything with this mask. We go everywhere with this mask. We don't ever take the mask off and just be. And so that is to me the point. Well, now I'm getting off on a different topic. I don't want to change topics now. Anyways, to reel it back in, because I've got a lot to say, I want to go back to Ollie and ask you a question. Do you feel like the masks that people wear are more so the characteristics of them thrown into a mask, or are they actually things that are just completely false? Because I honestly believe that a lot of people's masks that they wear truly are them in some way. Because there are a lot of people who say, like, the masks they wear are completely false, like it's not them at all. So I just want to hear your opinion on that.
Um, this is gonna get into my like honest opinions about things. So I am of the belief, and you can call it a belief, that most people live in denial. The Nile is a river. Um, Many of us are not able to take an honest look at ourselves, and by many I mean like almost the entirety of the population. It's very hard to be honest with ourselves. So when a lot of people say things like the mask I wear is not who I am, my opinion is you are lying to yourself, because if you're able to perform it, you are it. It's not your entirety. That's not who you are at all times. But you're capable of being that because you've done it. It's like, you know what I mean. Like, you can't
Right.
deny certain things because you're only lying to yourself. And so the topic of the masks is very close to home to me because I've had to go through unveiling my own mask and realizing, fuck, I am not always who I say I want to be. But the problem doesn't come from that. It doesn't come from the fact that you're not always meeting your own expectations. The problem itself is having those expectations, expecting you to be a very specific version of yourself. When you're a human, you change with your environment, and it's natural to not always be the person you want to be. But that's very much my opinion. I think some people are able to navigate life without a mask. I'm trying to be one of those people, but it, like I said, it requires a lot of pushing back against this very common occurrence that we humans like to pretend that things are okay when they're not 100% okay. But the very fact that we avoid it makes things worse.
Okay. And so when you say you're trying to navigate life without a mask, I want to ask this question and I'm gonna elaborate. I'll ask the question, I'll elaborate a little bit, then I'll come back and ask it again. Um, are masks always a bad thing? And do you think that sometimes they can protect us? And so I'm asking that because when you say to me, I'm learning to navigate life without wearing a mask, I kind of interpret that to mean I'm trying to be my most authentic or truest self all the time. Um, so I want to hear your opinion on that. Are masks always a bad thing?
I don't think they are. I don't see them as good or bad. I see them as like just what you do, you know, because the th- hmm, the thing is that we're not really conscious of when the mask is on, but when you look back and really analyze your behavior and are honest with yourself, you understand that the mask is really just recurring patterns. It's things that you keep on doing, but there's usually no like conscious awareness of why you're doing it. So kind of how one is supposed to deal with emotions, which is another thing that is not very well taught to humans. You're not supposed to see emotions as good or bad. They're just things that happen, and they can actually, if you pay attention to the messages that emotions are trying to convey, you can find the meaning of why things happen. And it's the same with the mask. It's patterns that you keep on falling back into, but it's not bad. It's just that that's what you're doing. It's a lack of awareness on what you're doing that allows you to keep on making those same choices and quote unquote mistakes.
Right. And so would you say that there's a price we have to pay? Ooh, this would be a good question. Do you think there's a price to pay wearing the mask versus do you think there's a price to pay if we take the mask off?
Um, yeah, there's price to pay on both, because when you take your mask off, the I mean, doesn't Future have a song about that? The thing about rap is that it's very honest and raw, and so like in that very specific song, when you take your mask off, you're being honest, you're being raw and authentic about your opinions. But the thing is that you're a human being. Your opinions aren't always beneficial for others, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be that way. Um, so I guess I want to clarify when it comes to the whole topic of the mask. There's no good or bad. Because when we start to divide things into good or bad, then we're like just projecting shadows. I believe. So
Projecting shadows from what?
from our own denials, because we all deny certain things in life. For example, if I were to say that putting on a mask is bad because it makes you less authentic, um, that would be me a judgment coming from me because that's been my experience. But what if for example, people are able to navigate with the mask by understanding this is how I interact with humans. This quote unquote meaning all the behaviors that you have. For example, you always greet people, doesn't matter if they're strangers. If you just see somebody, you greet them to acknowledge their existence. That is something that if you put into practice can become your mask, you know, and in that point you're having a mask. It's just unconscious behaviors that you have, but you cultivated those behaviors. So at that
I
point
would
the
like,
go ahead.
I would just say, I would like to coin that. Masks are unconscious behaviors that we act out. That was very phenomenal right there.
Thank you, thank you. And most of the things that I say, I do not take credit for. They're just messages that I've heard before and applied, and they resonated.
Right. I mean, that's everything. You didn't write every book you learned from, you know. I always say that.
Exactly.
And so this kind of comes back to when I mean pillars of healing and looking at the mask. So I'm of kind of the same similar thought process when it comes to masks being bad or good in general. And again, this will probably be its own topic for a podcast. I don't necessarily believe that anything is bad or good. It's only inherently bad or good, and I know we've talked about that privately. Um, but the reason I say that is because honestly, masks in a way can be a good thing for the simple fact that it's kind of how we navigate the world. You know, like you can't be the same. I mean, you can be. Let's not say you can't be, but you're not normally going to be the same way you are with everybody. And honestly, that's okay. And so when I mean healing and looking at these masks is almost to say our pillars or our foundation, I want people to ask themselves this question right here. With the mask you're wearing, are you able to truly heal with it on? And honestly, my answer to that would be no, because most majority of people are not wearing this mask just to kind of get through the world. They're wearing it to survive. And so that begs the question, or rather the statement. Well, never mind, it wouldn't be a statement, it'd be a question. Um, can you heal while you're in survival mode? And that answer is most definitely no. And so if we're wearing these masks to survive, which would look like we're going to school and we're almost in a way cosplaying or putting this mask on to, you know, be in groups we otherwise wouldn't necessarily be in if it were our true self, to be around our teammates and hang around them and laugh at the jokes they make and make jokes that they would laugh at that our true self really wouldn't laugh at. Can you truly heal? And I want to hear your opinion on this as well. Can you truly heal if you are in a survival mask kind of scenario? What is your opinion on that?
Well, it's a definite no for me, and having to justify it, it's gonna make me talk a lot. But
Huh.
generally, the the one saying that I like to go back to from this person called Candace Love on Instagram is that liars do not heal, and to me, um, I don't know if you're familiar with the chakra system and all of that. That's how I got into spirituality, and I found that my two biggest blockages are on the heart and the throat chakra. So being able to see myself as connected with other people, that's like the struggle of the heart. Seeing that connection instead of always feeling so isolated and alienated from others. And then the throat chakra, which is accepting truth. Um, so most of my opinions are gonna come from like the fact that I've been working on accepting truth. So to me, anything that allows lying is is just not beneficial for anybody because the truth is uncomfortable, but you need to go through discomfort to grow.
Right. And when you say go through, or actually, let me parallel to a different topic because this is something, or not topic necessarily, but you'll see what I mean. Um, when you bring up hiding, well, you said lying, I kind of just this thought popped into my brain. You can't heal what you won't admit hurts, and so if you're hiding from something, there's no way to get around that wound. And so taking the mask off is the point of looking at that wound, understanding what it truly is, and then once you are healed from it. being able to then put the mask back on. This is kind of to lean back on the, a mask isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing. Once you've healed that wound, you can then put that mask back on and then navigate the world as you would. But when we're doing our shadow work and you asked, am I familiar with the chakra system? My response is like, I am. And obviously not necessarily that, but yes, yes, that I am. Um, you know, Putting this mask back on, it's an okay thing to do, but we're looking to heal ourselves first, right? We're looking to understand the problems that are deep rooted within us, whether it be from childhood, whether it be from even just something that might have happened to you within a week. You want to be able to have the ability within your own level of comfort or exposure, or even to say intimacy could be a word, right? You want to have that level of intimacy or comfort within yourself to be able to take the mask off, set it on the table, get up, go look in the mirror, and address who it is that's really under the mask and take care of that. And so, in my opinion, putting forth effort and time to loving who it is who's under the mask, because I don't think that's something anybody who is really wearing this mask in a survival mode ever does. And just speaking from my own personal experience, I definitely never did that. I got my hand raised like I'm swearing Bible oath in the court or something like that. But I would literally go days and days and even to say years without looking who was under the mask because I was only concerned with who was at the top of the mask, or rather, I should say, I was only concerned with the mask itself. I would never check on myself, ask myself, and I want to clean it up or be more specific. When I say I would never ask myself, I am not saying me in the mask. I am saying who is wearing the mask, like who is underneath the mask. Like the person in the mask might be okay with smoke, and I've never smoked in my life. Um, but the person who is wearing the mask, they might not be okay with smoking, but the mask itself might be a smoker. Well, have I ever really looked at myself and said, like, do I want to stop smoking? It's things like that. It's questions like that. And this is honestly, I wish I don't wish we released the Paradox episode. It really was honestly pretty terrible. Um, but I wish we would have at least been able to had it out there in the way to say we can go back and expand on it. The only reason I bring that up is because what we kind of spoke about with paradoxes really was what was a paradoxical thought. And so I'll give an example. A paradox is it's two conflicting things but they're kind of on the same team. And so to say like I love her, but it's toxic. Both those things are true, but at the same time they stand alone as things that are true of their own volition. And so for me, when I'm looking at masks, when I'm looking at paradoxes, I feel, and this is why I wish we would have spoke about it, or rather released the episode. Um, Masks fit right into that paradigm of paradoxes because in my opinion honestly the masks themselves are kind of what create these paradoxes that we live within. We're trying to uphold all these different I don't want to call them, I want to use the word lives, but that's not really what I'm meaning. We're just trying to uphold all these different mask situations. Like on this one mask, mask A, we've got this going on. Mask B, we got this going on. Mask C, mask D, mask E. Just all these different masks, all these different situations are going on, and it's like we're trying to uphold all of it. And that right there is the paradox between everything. Is we're trying to be all these different quote quote people, but at the end of the day, we're only one person who's putting on these different masks and that begs the question for me to ask, do you even heal from all these separate masks that you're putting on? And I said this in the last episode that we didn't release. We are honestly only the cliff. I'm just feeling called to say this right now. We are only the cliff that you jump off of into the sea to find your questions. Don't think that you are climbing up the rock or the mountain and at the top of the cliff, which is us, you're going to have all these magical answers. And then I just remembered what our other episode we didn't finish recording was. It was, is there a true spiritual enlightenment end? Or rather, we phrased it, is there a certificate to spiritual enlightenment? And that answer was no. But, anyways, not to go off on a different tangent here, stay on the topic of masks. I feel like when you're trying to heal and you're overlooking this mask, and I really want to hammer this point because I feel like this is something a lot of people do. This is something I do. This is something Ollie's done. This is something everybody has done in their life. When you try to heal and you're still wearing that mask, and again, wearing that mask from a survival standpoint as opposed to one just kind of navigating, kind of going through the space time continuum, you're not ever giving yourself the time, the true chance to really get everything that is. That mask is still there, piece by piece, even if it's just a little bit. You've got to take it off. You just have to take it off.
Yes, and it's something. It's so interesting working with like metaphors and all of that because when you say take it off, we all understand what it means, but in practice, and that's the key. And I wanna highlight what you said. We're providing our experience so that people who can resonate can perhaps try what we've tried, or at least get curious on topics that we um, bring up. But ultimately, any type of work doesn't matter if it's mental, physical, it requires your action, you as a participant, because we've done our work and we're still unraveling our own selves, but just listening to other people's narrative will never be doing the work. It just helps encourage that inner part of you, that flame that is ever burning, to actually shine. you know
Right. And that's another thing too. This is just coming back in my mind when you said this. It's really important to understand that these masks or the masks that we wear, it was never about being fake, right? It was never about being a false person. It was about being safe. And I
mm-hmm.
feel like anyone who has truly, truly been in a predicament where they just feel like so uncomfortable, just anxiety comes to my mind. I'll give a quick example. When I was in elementary school, I was honestly the most awkward, like I don't know how to even interact with people person, but the outside persona of me wasn't. And so internally, and even in there is a paradox, but internally I had this like, how do I navigate the world? While on the outer, it was like, I just have to navigate the world because this is who I am. This is how my parents raised me to be. This is how things just are. Um, and so when I'm saying that it was always about being safe. What I'm more so saying is that we put this mask on at some point in life because life taught us that being who we were wasn't enough, or honestly, just even in the fact that uh, it really wasn't even allowed. And I'm just having so many thoughts come through my brain right now. And Ollie, I want to hear about this for you. Well, actually, I already know you'll definitely relate to this. There were a lot of circumstances or instances in my life where just being who I was, take the mask off, get home, it wasn't allowed. Like, or let me rephrase that. The person I was when I went home and took the mask off, that person right there, it just simply wasn't allowed. And it wasn't from like a discipline standpoint or nothing like that. But again, speaking to that, like being uncomfortable or having anxiety amongst quote, quote, friends or certain groups, it was like, I can't be who the fuck I really am around y'all. And if I do, y'all are going to fucking cook me, bro. Like, y'all are going to crucify me. So I want to hear about that for you. Did you kind of have that same similar experience? Although I know you did. I just kind of want to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. I really like this question. So, there's so much. There's so much. Yes, I remember. Actually, my struggle was kind of the opposite. When I was at school was the only time that I could actually be myself. Because the way that I saw it, I came to America when I was in eighth grade. So I always felt like an outsider, and I never really felt connected to the people in school, only to my small group. So I didn't really care what other people thought about me in school because I didn't know them, and I had no intentions to know them. But at home, that's where I couldn't take the mask off, because I'm embraced by Catholic Americans, not Americans, Catholic Mexicans. So there's a lot of even that brings a lot of masking. there's a lot of behaviors to be expected from a man in the family, right? And I did not meet any, well, not any. I didn't meet many of those behaviors, and I was fully aware of them. But I've always been of the rebellious nature, so I understood that I couldn't be myself at all times. But I would try always to like sneak in parts of me that I knew were safe enough to come out. But that's the thing; it's like walking on eggshells. It's fucking exhausting.
It
um,
gets tiring after a while.
yeah, and something that I wanted to say when you were mentioning your situation. Um, I did it in the way that I would play video games nonstop because I felt so isolated from my family since they were navigating how to be immigrants in America. I was navigating how to be a first generation in America, and that created a lot of alienation because I had to assimilate while they didn't have that pressure because, and this is like the dark side of being an immigrant son, first generation. They didn't really have to worry about assimilating because they had me. You know, I was the one taking care of the businesses, of all the paperwork because I was the only one who could speak English. Um, so just there's a lot of pressures on your own family. And what I wanted to say, which I didn't end up saying, masking shows very differently from person to person. So I've been able to tell that my parents, when they mask, it doesn't look like me because obviously they have a completely different life and they're on a different age range. But I understand when they're masking. Um, and that's the thing, that's what keeps me going through my healing journey because I know that a lot of people who are well into their livelihood, they are still struggling with being authentic to themselves. And I do too, right? But I can't picture myself on that situation later on in life. You know,
Right.
it's a very scary thought.
Why scary?
Um, to look back, well, what I mean specifically is to like to look back. This is how I've been thinking for a long time in my life. I don't want to lay in my deathbed and regret any form of living. Like I don't want to be about to die and say I should have done this, I should have done that, because I know it happens. Like for example, when I'm undecisive and I'm like, oh damn, I should have done that. I already feel very guilty about it. I can't imagine myself being in that position when I'm about to die.
Yeah, like I wish I woulda, coulda, shoulda, woulda kind of thing then, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. And so another thing I would like to bring up as well is that at some point the mask it quits being a choice that we put on and it almost becomes a necessity or like who it is that we are. And so my number one map, well, honest, it's so funny. You can always say my number one this, and then there's like a million number ones, right? But
right,
my number one mask for me that I feel like is very prevalent was basketball. Um, and just anything to do with it. The fact I went to school, I damn near really only went to school to play basketball. Growing up, all my friends were basketball players. All I looked forward to going to school was basketball season and basketball practice. It quite literally became who I was to the point that I mean, like, everything I spent my money on was basketball related. All I would spend my time doing was watching basketball or playing basketball video games. Literally outside playing basketball, meeting friends, and even to say some ladies through basketball. Like the mask became my entire personality, life, point of living, just literally everything. If it wasn't basketball, I wasn't going to do it. But then when we go back to when I'm saying pillars of foundation, the only reason that I was doing that was because of lack of what was really how would I put this? Like, and I, not I'm not I'm a straight man, but I'm just liking it to the fact of I would imagine it was hard to come out to certain people. And maybe it wasn't for you specifically, but I know someone out there, they might be dealing with this. It might be hard to come out to someone who you love or are really close friends with because you're almost scared of like what they'll see you as if, they know what the true you is. And honestly, that is like what I truly felt my whole life growing up was like if I take this mask off and I be who I really am, y'all aren't going to fuck with me at all. Like, not even 1%, not even like passing in the hallways. Like, you won't even look at me. And I won't even get into that topic. That's a whole separate topic. Anyways, um, it's like you wouldn't even look at me. And so growing up most of my life, I kind of became conditioned to this mask of playing basketball that I would wear. And that is not to say that I didn't love basketball, but it grew to the point where it was like, hey, if I am not this, then I am not anything. And so I want to hear your experience with any mask that you've worn, whether it be from a time you were a child or even now. What masks were there for you where you kind of felt like, if I take this off, you guys aren't going to fuck with me?
Ooh, so you touch on a core trauma. Um, so I had a back in Mexico. I moved here to America at 13. When I was around 10, I remember. I had a small group of friends, which is funny because life does tend to repeat itself, right? So I've always had that small, about four friends group, and throughout my whole life. So the very first one that I had was back then in Mexico, and there was this girl. There is this girl, and she was always like there for me. So before I left to America, I was very well aware that I was leaving, right? But I didn't say goodbye to anybody. Uh, I don't I don't want to even rationalize why I did that, but that has followed me for a long time. It's a lot of regret and guilt, and it feeds my abandonment issues. But I remember before I came here, uh, me and her had a very important conversation about her state of being because her life was very rough too. And so we would be very honest with one another, but I could never be honest about that one fact that I was queer, that I am queer. And I came so close to telling her because I knew that I was leaving and I knew that I wouldn't get a chance like that, but I could never ever follow through with that. Um, and so that was kind of like the core memory because this is the thing about personas and masks. They, like we said, they form from patterns that you keep on repeating. So for me, I always remember that specific instance when I couldn't utter the words to her, and I actually did tell her. I was like, I have something very important to tell you, but I couldn't say that. um, and so that's like it had been a core memory for me for long, and that's why I wasn't able to come out with my family. But all of that broke down on COVID, and I've mentioned this before. But it's like many of the things that we keep in our masks, we are very aware where they're coming from, but it's painful to look there. And it is painful, but like I've said, and this is like a life motto, you will not get any growth without the discomfort of going through the pain. So anyways, yes.
Bar.
Yeah, that was the memory. Not being able to tell the one person that I felt safe around her, but this expectation, this idea that if I reveal who I am fully to you, you will follow everyone else's stereotype. Like now that I reflect on it, like the reason why I was able to heal from this wound is because I don't know what could have happened. What if her love was bigger than any label, than any misinformation she was ever fed, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I always thought deep down that she knew. And when I became an adolescent and I went back, nothing was ever spoken about that, but there was a certain acceptance that doesn't matter what I believe about myself, I am welcome with her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like almost an unspoken truth.
Yeah, and it's very much an experiential thing. It's not like you just know when you're welcome somewhere.
Right.
Hmm.
Your intuition tells you. You just know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you kind of brought up you said something very magnificent there, and this just popped into my mind. When we're wearing these masks, we oftentimes seek them as, or even to say look at them as protection or some form of armor, but truly they're isolation. And so the reason that I say that is because it's like it's pulling you further and further and further away from who you truly are within your own soul, or just to say even your own body, your own flesh. And so it's very important, young people, if you're listening, even older people, you probably had these masks on for years at this point, but more so to the younger people, it's very important that you always take that look back to yourself, and even the older people, if there's by chance older people listening to this, it's important that you turn back and you look at that mask, because you have to ask yourself, am I getting further away from myself every time I put this mask on? Because in a way, it almost becomes an escape. And like I said earlier, a lot of times people are wearing these masks out of survival conditions. And so if we're escaping something, obviously we're not healing. And if we're not healing, then what are we doing, right? Like we want to heal and get healed. So yeah, I just kind of thought popped in my brain.
Yeah, it's so it's so it's crazy to like see the same issue through very different perspectives. Because all I've been doing these past 2 years is like expanding my perspective to understand where I'm at, and I've been able to do that. But just all these different frameworks who are saying the same thing. It's all about being authentic to yourself, because when you just know when you're not being authentic, and that's not a bad thing. It's more of a feeling of like, ooh, discomfort. um Healing for me, it's been very subtle, very much on the subtlety of things, because like I said, you just know when you're lying to yourself, but not a lot of us have, like, I guess, the ability to recognize and reconciliate with that. um
Right.
yeah, it's very much, when we put on masks, we are walking away from our truth. And that is such an ambiguous phrase that I try not to use, but yeah, like that feeling of alignment, what is right, what is correct, at least for us.
And so to step into the aspect of healing, um, I would say this as well. The first step to healing a mask, or even to say healing yourself, would be one, not just ripping off the mask, but admitting that it's there, right? Name the mask, call it the role, whatever one it is. If you're the quiet person, if you're the kind of like Ollie was saying, you're the person who's handling the in between for other people, like the mitigator. It doesn't matter, right? There's no shame. Just be honest with yourself. Admit that that mask is there. Focus on the aspects of not even to say healing the mask, but recognizing that it's there. And that is to say, even you have to know something is going on before you can address it, right? You don't actually focus on the physical action of addressing something. You actually have to focus on the, or sorry, you don't focus on the actual the healing of what it is you're addressing. You have to address it first. And so we need to recognize that these masks are there before we figure out how we're going to take them off, or even worry about what life is going to be like when we take it off. The healing starts in the first step, which is recognizing the mask is even something you're putting on every day.
Yes, and let us remember that it's usually out of survival. And anything that's out of survival, that's like, some call it the reptilian brain. It's very much our instincts, what our animal part of humans. So when we're overly concerned about survival, which isn't always up to us, right? There is such thing as oppression, external oppression, that keeps us feeling small. But from within, you can harvest safety, and that only starts when you start admitting that you are unsafe, that you're feeling unsafe. And I remember having this epiphany in a coffee shop, where I literally wrote down, "Oh my god, I have social anxiety." And that was the first time that I even thought of social anxiety. Um, but then I started to read and inform myself about what being a victim, I guess, or having social anxiety is like for the person. And so I saw my own experience on those words. Whenever other people approach me, my reaction is to flee, to not engage, because why would anybody approach me? So a lot of healing can be catalyzed by just asking the right questions. But like I've said before, it's very hard to take an honest look to in ourselves. But it's a necessity.
Right. And even to build off that point, an important point of looking at the mask that we're wearing is honestly grieving it. And so as we were saying earlier, it's not like this mask you were wearing wasn't you. It was your armor. Like it literally was a version of you. It's okay to grieve it. And honestly, I would say it's honestly a I just said honestly twice. You know, my dad always said, I got to throw this out there. It's off topic as fuck. My dad would always say, you know, every time you say honestly, I think you're fucking lying. And it just would be like something his ass would always say. But anyways, um, when you're looking to heal this mask that you're wearing, you have to remember that grieving is a part of getting over something, right? You break up with your boyfriend, you break up with your girlfriend, you cry and you get past it. So we have to remember that grief, and as I was going to say, grief is an essential part of getting over a mask, but not even a mask. Any of the things that we will speak about from a spiritual standpoint or even a materialistic slash worldly aspect or outlook on a thing, grieving is a an essential part of getting past things and really just to say healing ourselves in general.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So let's bring in the concept of reincarnation, I guess, or rebirthing, whatever we want to conceptualize this endless process of the old becomes the new. Um, it's like when you clean your closet or when you clean around your surface area in your room, if there's nothing, for example, if you clean a desk and you don't put any sort of intention on how you want it to look like, it'll get cluttered up because it's just an empty desk and sometimes you have needs to meet. But when you clean it and you put decorations and you say this is how it's supposed to look because I want it this way, then when you go ahead and unconsciously put clutter on it, you're able to trigger that memory of, no, I told myself I'm not going to do that. And so a small practice of not doing it, of going against the programming that it's okay to just throw things around, um, that's the kind of work that we're talking about here. I feel.
100%. And I actually, before we shift totally, I want to go back to this. You had said something. I kind of want you to further elaborate on it. You, and maybe I mistakenly heard, but did you say you can harbor safety?
Um, I said harvest.
Harvest safety. What do you mean by that?
Um, it's very, very, very intricate. So I do yoga. Why? Because I've been able to understand the limits of my physical abilities by actually doing it, by actually pushing my body to those limits. Um, the idea wasn't enough. I couldn't think myself of doing certain things and then just do them. I had to think it first and then do it, like practice it consciously. And the thing is, when you practice any skill, you're gonna suck at first, but it's about the repetition and showing up again and understanding that just you showing up and doing whatever you can in that position, it doesn't matter how small the steps are, that is progress. And nothing in life is immediate. That's like, well, nothing worth in life is immediate in my perspective. So, what I'm talking about cultivating or harvesting safety is understanding that the world outside of you is hectic and you have zero control over it, but you have a lot of control of things within you. And this goes back to the whole mass thing of living life not in survival mode, but on assessing what is actually happening to you, taking the time to introspect and all of that. Um, you have to understand that a lot of the sources of your concept of safety are external. So if you don't have, for example, I don't want to say this because I've never been homeless. So, but for example, if you don't have a home of your own, you don't own a home, you're not a home owner. Um, if you keep on tying this sense of stability and safety to the idea of having a home, well, while your reality doesn't present that, meaning that you don't own a home, but you only believe that you can be stable if you own a home, you are literally putting yourself in a situation where where you're telling yourself literally, I do not have safety.
Mm.
Oh, that was like a little discombobulated because I haven't really thought about that. It just came.
But I understand even in the way of this, like when I hear that, I interpret it to be what you lack internally and you feed off of externally. Your mind gets tricked into thinking that the lack is coming from the external when truly it's the internal. So I understand what you're putting down there, and even when you just spoke about kind of exist. Well, you didn't say this, but I interpreted it in my brain as existing within the mask, or learning to exist without the mask on. Sorry, that brought me into my next point of what to do, quote, quote, when you're healing the mask. And that is honestly practice unmasking, practice being you without the mask on, even if it is in the most microscopic of ways. If someone you normally hang out with knows you always get a certain drink or a certain something, but you only get that because of this mask, change your answers up. You got to slowly live in the skin that you are in. And even that kind of sounds a little bit silly, but truly, like, you've got to live who you are to be who you are. At some point, you've got to take the mask off. So you got to start doing it, even again, if it's at a microscopic level, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, even if you're feeling like the world. And this literally just popped in my brain, so I want to share this as well. You spoke about having the realization or the epiphany, like, hey, I actually have social anxiety. That's something I realized, and this mask that I wore clouded me with it just because to speak about who I am from a strictly um what's the word I want to use, like, not material, but I guess you could say almost like an egotistical kind of esque mindset. I'm a tall man. I'm a quote quote N word, like a real N word, right? Like those who understand get my drift. Having something like social anxiety does not go in the realm of that. But I
Mm-hmm.
could tell you every time I step into a store, or every time I would step into a store and I'd be faced with a bit of a predicament, or there'd be a lot of people in there, my heart would start racing, and it'd be like, I don't know why. It just is. Or like my skin would get really clammy, or I'd start having a lot of thoughts that kind of were just come out of nowhere. And here I am thinking all these things are normal, but in reality, and especially as I've done my retrospective healing and I'm looking back, I'm like, that's because I'm wearing this fucking mask everywhere, bro. Like, I'm having these thoughts, I'm having this feeling of anxiety because I'm not even being who I truly am. And I'm worried about that subconsciously. And that is to say, not to go off on a different tangent, but that is to say, our subconscious thoughts and feelings are going to come through to the surface, even if we don't recognize it. And that's kind of what, for me, at least in my own experience, I recognized that anxiety and all those things to be where my subconscious, or really my true self, the person underneath the mask, come into the surface. So if I'm in a predicament where I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable, it's not because this situation is making me uncomfortable. It's because this situation is bothering. I guess this is technically making me uncomfortable, but it's because this situation is bothering who's really under this mask. And that is a problem that I always would put on the back burner.
Yeah, and oh my God, it's such a nefarious thing, the way the masks work, because essentially, what I've come to a conclusion throughout this discussion, they are self monitoring devices, essentially, the way that we ourselves react to how we interact with life. because social anxiety is such a nefarious thing. We all experience that to a certain degree, and it's not even up to us. It's not even our fault. It's the fault, not the fault. The fact that our society is so structured, it's structured in a way that is so individualistic that community is not really a thing. So wherever you walk in as a stranger, just immediately you get triggered because it's just not normal to walk into big crowds of people that you don't know, but we've normalized living that way.
Right.
Um, so yeah, like we can talk about how our masks develop from our own individual trauma, but there's also that layer of we live under a society and we learn to behave in very specific ways that are not always for our best interest.
Doing what aligns with others' best interests, but not our own.
And there's definitely a balance that we can achieve between what I'm comfortable doing and what I'm expected to be doing. You can actually arrive to a conclusion that's good for both parties, but it requires a lot of awareness, which is
Awareness of what? Be specific for the people
yes.
who might, for the people who have never even thought about having a mask on.
Um, Awareness is of who you are. It's very much like who you are versus who you say you are, because we all like to idealize ourselves, and that's a good thing. It's good to strive for perfection. We have an idea of our perfect version, our higher self, but we also have to understand that we're not that at all times. And so having the awareness that right now you're not your best self, or the things that you've been doing lately are not your best self, it's not something your best self would do, without attributing guilt to it, right? Or shame, because it's okay to be human. Um, that's what I mean by awareness, like understanding that not just, oh, how do I even put this? Because, like I said, you know when you're not being true to yourself, but awareness would be understanding it and accepting it instead of completely avoiding it because that doesn't go with my narrative. Does that make sense?
Right, that totally does. And so I'm just kind of having this thought. Would you say that you also can have awareness even if you're deflecting it though?
Um, I see, I see. Yeah, I think so. And at that point, it's like we can talk about the theory of it all, but it's really comes down to what do you do at that point. Like if you are aware that you're not being authentic, which this has actually happened to me recently a lot, in which I'm in scenarios that I find myself in everyday life, and then suddenly I'm aware that I'm not being authentic, and then I'm in my head thinking I could really just be authentic to myself right now, but there's obviously going to be consequences that I'm not willing to put up with. And so we deflect it. But that's the thing, once it's in your awareness, you can't escape it. More scenarios are going to raise up in that form, and eventually you're gonna have to give in to choosing better for yourself. Because life has this funny way of putting things on your face with more and more emphasis every time until you listen.
I hear that. Um, well, I want to get to these journal prompt questions. We're coming up on an hour here, so people are probably like, "Holy fuck, these dudes can just fucking talk." Like, yeah, we can. But anyways, so I got 5 questions here that I got written down to kind of, and again, these are just the journal prompt. Get into them, and actually, let me preface this by saying, I know it's gonna sound so funny, but in my opinion, if you're looking to remove your masks, the best thing you can do is throw on a meditation, meditate, first get high, just being honest. And I would recommend you do it with some form of an edible, like a drop or a like drops or a tincture kind of resin mixture. If you smoke and that's your cherry, go ahead. You know, I personally don't smoke, but I would recommend getting high, doing a meditation, and then either listening to a podcast like this that's going to have you think thoughts, or open up your journal and write about questions like the ones I'm about to list. Because what's going to happen is you're going to start to have all kind of epiphanies realizations, breakthroughs. Okay, I didn't mean to do that when I did this. Okay, I don't actually want to do that when I'm. You're going to just have all these thoughts that come to your mind. And again, you have to put it on paper because even though we think we can hold all these thoughts, this will honestly be the perfect example or analogy or metaphor when you're getting high and you're having your meditation, listening to podcasts and having these breakthroughs. If you're having them in your brain, it's like walking to the door, opening it up, seeing the sunshine outside, but not putting it on paper is like not walking out that door. You've actually got to walk out that door to have the literal breakthrough. You've got to put it on paper. If you type it on the computer, I mean, like I said in the previous podcast, I would recommend putting it on paper. But if you're putting it on the computer, however, you're actually getting it out of your brain and onto a physical form of something that is not your brain, that is the walking through the door. So, with that being said, here are those 5 questions. Number one, what part of myself do I feel the need to hide the most and why? Number two, what am I most afraid of people would think of me or say about me if they saw the real me? And that is to say, the person under the mask. Number three, who taught me that my authentic self wasn't good enough? Have I ever questioned if they were wrong? Number four, what do I gain from wearing this mask? What do I lose? Number five, what emotions do I avoid feeling by staying behind the mask?
Those are
You
good
ain't got nothing to
questions.
say?
Me?
Okay, then I guess that's it. He look every time he goes quiet for more than 10 seconds. I'm like, all right, that's it. We're cool. No, I joke. You got any other little things you want to chip in?
Um, so I like to just give my honest thoughts on the journey itself. It's going to be hard to ask these questions, but the thing is, overcoming that feeling of resistance, that's what you're after. Um, the activities may be very different, and we're giving you journal prompts this time, right? But it's showing yourself that you are willing to do the uncomfortable thing for your own benefit. That's the work itself. It doesn't matter how it looks. It's that it's very much an experience thing, because you know when you know better but you don't do better,
Right.
the actual work is giving yourself that permission to do better. And if you don't, it's also a great part of the work to forgive yourself, right? So that's just because I remember when I was trying to follow journal prompts, that was so fucking hard for me. It was
Yeah,
so hard.
and when you say hard, do you mean hard to come up with an answer?
For me, it was to just sit down and accept it. You know,
Mm.
eventually, I that's the funny thing about my own journey is that when I came across certain practices, I would let them simmer because I knew that if I tried it that right then and there, I would blank out. So I let them simmer, and eventually they found their way into my daily practice. So
Right.
journaling, eventually I started, instead of just writing for my day, I wrote for my day and then I asked myself something. I started very
Mm.
small. Because some of us need that, you know. A lot of us are very good at overcoming that fear, but some not all of us are. Especially the people like me that grew up with a lot of hypervigilance from helicopter parents, being very over sheltered. That like we keep our parents' fears of the world and we make them ours.
We take the external and kind of, well, all right, that means we're done. I'm fucking up. As soon as I fuck up, that's it. Uh, Anyways, okay. Well, what I was gonna say, I'll finish that thought. We take the external and we interpret it to be what's internal, but it is not. It truly, or yeah, I actually fucked up. I'm literally fucking up, fucking up, fucking up, fucking up. No, I joke. Okay. Anyways, um, that is that. That is this. This was episode 3. You are taking this mask off, putting it on the fucking ground, shitting on it. Well, I ain't gonna say shitting on it. Some people still wear their masks. I'm in the same boat too with Ollie. I'm trying to learn how to every day just be my true authentic self, not wear any masks. Um, in lame terms, not give a fuck. Hopefully we don't get demonetized. Sorry, YouTube. I'm a big cursor. Anyways, we're not even looking to get monetized in general. But okay. With that being said, this was episode 3. Welcome to the spaceship. We spoke about masks, and yeah, that's it.
See y'all later.